Buckets and Spectacles Chapter 2. Reynie, alone in the room now, was trying to make sense of what had happened. Why hadn't Rhonda Kazembe been called? Was it because she cheated? Did she have the wrong answers, after all? And where did she get those answers in the first place? It was all very mysterious, and not the least intriguing was Rhonda's behavior when she was dismissed along with the others. "Well, best of luck, kid," she'd chirped, playfully musing his hair and scudding from the room in her cloud dress, apparently not the slightest bit confused or disappointed that she hadn't passed. Reynie's musings were interrupted by the pencil woman pulling her head in through the doorway. "We've finally gotten rid of the other children, Reynard. Had to give them consolation donuts and hugs and whatnot. Only a few more minutes now to wait." She was already withdrawing again when Reynie called after her. "Excuse me. Miss. I'm sorry, you never told us your name." "That's fine, Reynard," she said, stepping into the room. "You've nothing to be sorry for." Reynie waited for her to give her name. Instead, she simply wiped donut crumbs from her lips and said, "You had a question?" "Oh, yes. May I please telephone Miss Paramal, my tutor? No one has any idea where I am. I'm afraid she'll be worried." "Very good of you, Reynard, but don't worry. We've already called Miss Paramal, so all is taken care of." The pencil woman began once again to retreat. "Miss? Excuse me, miss?" She stopped. "Yes, what is it now, Reynard?" "Forgive me for asking this, Mississippi. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important, but..." "Well, you wouldn't happen to be lying to me, would you?" "Lying to you? I'm sorry to ask it. But, you did tell Miss Paramal this morning that I could use your phone, and then later you told me there was no phone. So you see why I'm concerned. It's just that I don't want Miss Paramal to worry." The pencil woman seemed unperturbed. "That's a perfectly reasonable question, Reynard. A perfectly reasonable question." She gave him an approving nod and made it as if to leave, "Miss, but you didn't answer my question." The woman scratched her head, and Reynie began to suspect that she was either a little daft or a little deaf. After a moment, however, she said, "I suppose you want the truth?" "Yes, please. The truth is I haven't called Miss Paramal, but I will do so immediately. I was about to call her when you asked me if I had called her yet. Does this satisfy you?" Reynie hardly knew what to say. He didn't wish to offend the woman, but he could hardly trust her now, and it was more important to know that Miss Paramal's mind was at ease. "I'm sorry, miss, but please call her myself? I'll only take a minute." The pencil woman smiled. When she spoke this time her voice was quite gentle, and she looked Reynie in the eyes. "You are perfect to be so concerned about Miss Paramal. What would you say if I told you that I have called her already?" "No, don't answer that. You won't believe me. How about this? I'll relay her message to you. Do you see now that you didn't need luck? I'm glad you wore matching socks. That is what she told me to tell you. Are you satisfied?" Before Reynie could make up his mind how to answer, she slipped out of the room, leaving him to puzzle over her mystifying behavior. The message from Miss Paramal was real, so why hadn't she told him in the first place? As he pondered this, he heard footsteps in the hall, followed by a timid knock at the half-open door. A young boy's face appeared in the doorway. "Hello," the boy said, adjusting his spectacles. "Is this where I'm supposed to wait?" He spoke so softly that Reynie had to strain to hear him. "I have no idea. It's where I'm supposed to wait, though, so maybe it is. You're welcome to join me if you like. I'm Reynie Muldoon." "Oh," the boy said uncertainly. "My name is Sticky Washington. I'm just wondering if this is the right place. The yellow lady told me to come down the hall and sit with someone named Reynard." "That's me," Reynie said. "People call me Reynie for short." He put out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation Sticky Washington came and shook it. Sticky was a notably skinny boy. Which Reynie suspected was how he got his nickname. He was thin as a stick, with light brown skin the very color of the tea that Miss Paramal made each morning. He had big, nervous eyes like a horse's, and, for some odd reason, a perfectly smooth bald head. His tiny wire-rimmed spectacles gave him the distinguished look of a scholar. A fidgety scholar, though. He seemed quite shy, or at the very least anxious. Well, why shouldn't he be anxious, if he'd been through what Reynie had been through today? "Are you here for the third test?" Reynie asked. Sticky nodded. "I've been waiting all day. I had to be here at 9 o'clock this morning, and the test was over at 10. Since then I've just been sitting around in an empty room. Luckily I had a pear with me or I might have starved. I think all the other children got donuts. Why didn't we get donuts?" I wondered the same thing. "Were you the only one who passed, then?" "The first test, no. A little girl passed it, too, but I hadn't seen her since yesterday. Maybe they told her to come at a different time, they've had tests here all day." "Was there an extremely small girl in your group, about half our size?" Reynie shook his head. He would have remembered anyone so tiny. "Maybe she's coming later." Anyway, as for the second test, yes, I was the only one who passed. Which surprised me because Sticky stopped himself with a glance at the doorway. He opened his mouth to continue, thought better of it, and at last pretended to notice something on the ceiling as if he hadn't been about to say anything at all. He had a secret. Reynie had a sudden suspicion that it was because there was a girl who cheated? Sticky's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "The same thing happened to me. I think it's a trick of some kind." "Tell me, this girl didn't happen to drop her pencil on the way into the building, did she? Out on the plaza?" "Yes. I couldn't believe anybody would take such a chance. We were only allowed to bring one pencil, you know. What did you do?" "I tried to help her. A few other kids said they were sorry but they didn't want to be late, and one boy even laughed. I felt awfully sorry for her, so I had her hold on to my feet and lower me down through the grate. She was strong as a bear and had no trouble doing it, and I'm so skinny I fit right through the bars. It was terrifying, though, I don't mind admitting it, hanging upside down, scrabbling around in the dark. I think something even nibbled at my finger, but maybe I imagined it. I can get a little mixed up when I'm scared." "You were lucky to find her pencil," Reynie observed. "It was pitch black down in that drain." "Oh, no, I didn't find it." "But you know what she did?" "She hauled me back up through the grate and said, 'Oh well, never mind. I have an extra one.' And she pulled another pencil right out of her sleeve. Can you believe it? Why she would let me go down into that awful drain when she had an extra pencil, I can't imagine. Then, to top it off, she offered me the answers to the test, to repay me for trying to help her. They didn't do her any good, though. I'm glad I refused." "Me, too," Reynie said. "I think refusing was part of the test. If we'd cheated, they would have known it, and I doubt either one of us would be here." From his shirt pocket, Sticky took out a thin piece of cotton cloth and polished his spectacles with it. "If you're right, it's a little creepy that they're tricking us like that." He put the glasses back on and blinked his big, nervous eyes. "But I shouldn't complain. They were very nice to let me continue to the third stage even though I missed a few questions. Very generous of them." "Wait a minute," Reynie said. "How could you possibly have missed any? Did you circle the wrong letters by accident?" Sticky seemed embarrassed. He shuffled his feet as he spoke. "Oh, well, I suppose the questions were easy for you, but for me, they were rather difficult. Time ran out before I could answer the last three, so I had to just circle some answers and hope I'd get lucky. I didn't, of course. But as I said, they were very forgiving." Reynie couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You mean you knew the answers to those questions?" Sticky grew more dejected with Reynie's every question. Tears brimmed in his eyes as he said, "Well, yes, I suppose I do look rather stupid, don't I? I look like a person who doesn't know any answers." "I understand that." Reynie interrupted him. "No, no. I didn't mean that. I meant that I'm surprised anybody knew the answers. One or two, maybe, but certainly not all of them." Sticky brightened, smiling shyly and straightening his back. "Oh. Well, yes, I suppose I do know a lot of things. That's why people started calling me Sticky, because everything I read sticks in my head." "It's perfectly amazing," Reynie said. "You must read more than anybody I've ever met. But listen, once you figured out the test was a puzzle, why didn't you just solve it that way? It would have saved time, you could have finished it. A puzzle? You didn't notice that the answers were all right there in the test?" "I did notice that a lot of information was repeated," Sticky reflected, "but I didn't pay attention to it. I was concentrating too hard on getting the answers right. That question on colloidal suspensions had me sweating, I can tell you, and as I said, when I'm anxious I can get mixed up." After a pause, he sighed and added, "I tend to get anxious a lot." Reynie laughed. "Well, you didn't know it was a puzzle, and I didn't know any of the answers, but we're both here now. We'd make a good team." "You think so?" said Sticky. He grinned. "Yes, I suppose we would." The boys waited there for some time, discussing the curiosities of the day. Sticky was more relaxed now, and soon the two of them grew comfortable together, joking and laughing like old friends. Sticky couldn't stop giggling about Rhonda Kazembe's crazy getup, and Reynie smiled until his face hurt when Sticky told him more about hanging upside down in the storm drain. "My shoes started to slip off in her hands," Sticky recounted, "and for a second I thought she was going to take them and leave me down here under the grate. I panicked and started wriggling like crazy. I think it was all she could do to pull me back up without dropping me." Then Reynie told Sticky about the pencil woman's sneakiness regarding the phone call to Miss Paramal. Instead of laughing, as Reynie had expected, Sticky slipped back into his nervous behavior. He began polishing his spectacles again, even though he'd just done it minutes before. "Oh, yes," he said. "Yes, I tried to call my parents, too. The same thing happened. But in the end, it was fine. She called them. Nothing to worry about." Reynie nodded politely. He saw perfectly well that Sticky was trying to hide something. Maybe he hadn't thought of calling his parents and felt guilty about it now. But Reynie decided not to press him on the matter. Sticky seemed uncomfortable enough as it was. "So where do you live?" he asked, to change the subject. This only made Sticky polish all the harder. Perhaps he simply disliked personal questions. "Well," he began. He cleared his throat. Well, just then the door flew wide open, and a girl raced into the room carrying a bucket. She was extremely quick. The moment she was bursting through the door, golden blonde hair flew out behind her like a horse's mane, and the next she was standing right beside them. Sticky leaped back in alarm. "What's the matter?" he cried. "What's the matter with you?" the girl replied calmly. "Well, what were you running from?" "From? I wasn't running from anything. I was running to this room. Old Yellow Suit told me to come down here and wait with you too, so here I am. My name's Kate Weatherall." Sticky was breathing hard and casting glances at the door, as if a lion might fly in next, so it fell to Reynie to introduce them. "I'm Reynie Muldoon and this is Sticky Washington," he said, shaking her hand and immediately regretting it. Her grip was so strong it was like getting his fingers caught in a drawer. Sticky noticed Reynie's pained expression and quickly thrust his own hands into his pockets. Rubbing his tender knuckles, Reynie went on, "I think the question is why you were running instead of walking." "Why not? It's faster. Now I'm here with you boys instead of trudging along the empty hallway, and it's much better, isn't it? You seem like nice fellows. So why do they call you Sticky?" She touched Sticky's arm. "You don't feel sticky." "It's a long story," Sticky said, regaining his composure. Let's have it, then, Kate said. So Sticky told her about his name, and then Kate revealed that she had always wanted a nickname herself. I've tried to get people to call me the Great Kate Weather Machine, she said, but nobody ever goes along with it. I don't suppose you boys would call me that, would you? It does seem a bit awkward for a nickname, Reynie said mildly. It takes a long time to say. I suppose it does, Kate admitted, but not if you speak very quickly. Let us think about it, said Sticky. Kate nodded, agreeing. She seemed pleasant enough. She had very bright, watery blue eyes, a fair complexion, and rosy cheeks, and was unusually tall and broad-shouldered for a 12-year-old. She announced her age right away, for children consider their ages every bit as important as their names. In return she learned that the boys were 11. But what Reynie was most curious about was her bucket. It was a good, solid metal bucket, painted fire engine red. As they were talking, Kate unfastened her belt, slipped it through the bucket handle, and fastened the belt again so that the bucket hung at her hip. From the way she did this, it was obvious she'd done it 1,000 times. Reynie was fascinated. Finally, he asked her what it was for. She gave him a quizzical look. What kind of person doesn't know what a bucket's for? It's for carrying things, silly. Yes, I know that, Reynie said, but why do you have one with you? Most people don't carry buckets around for no particular reason. That's true, Kate reflected. I've often noticed that, but I can't understand why. I can't imagine not having a bucket. How else am I to tote my things? What things? Asked Sticky, who, like Reynie, was trying to sneak a peek at the bucket's contents. I'll show you, Kate said and began removing things from the bucket. First came a Swiss Army knife, a flashlight, a pen light, and a bottle of extra-strength glue, which Kate examined to be sure its lid was tightly closed. Then she produced a bag of marbles, a slingshot, a spool of clear fishing twine, one pencil and one eraser, a kaleidoscope, and a horseshoe magnet, which she yanked with some effort from the metal bucket. I've been through dozens of these, she said, holding the magnet up for them to admire. This is the strongest I've found. Finally, she showed them a length of slender nylon rope coiled around the bottom and sides of the bucket. That's a lot of stuff to carry, Sticky remarked. It's all useful, Kate said, putting her things away again. Take this morning, for example. Some crazy-looking girl dropped her pencil down a storm drain out on the plaza. Reynie and Sticky looked at each other. And if I didn't have my bucket with me, Kate continued, she'd have been up a creek without a paddle. A thoughtful expression came over her face. A paddle would be great to have. But no, I suppose it would be too big to haul around. Still, it would come in handy sometimes. Did you help Rhonda get her pencil back? Reynie asked. Of course I did. Now wait a minute. How did you know her name? Finish your story, Reynie said. We'll tell you later. So Kate told them how she had pried up the edge of the metal grate with a screwdriver on her Swiss Army knife. After dragging the grate aside, she tied her rope to a nearby bench and lowered herself into the drain, using her flashlight to find the pencil in the darkness. It had rolled down into a crack, she explained, about 10.5 inches deep, so I put a drop of glue on the end of some fishing twine. That's why it pays to have a pen light, too, you know, so you can hold it in your mouth and point it when you need both hands for something like putting glue on twine. Anyway, I poked the twine down into the crack until it reached the pencil. Gave the glue a few seconds to dry, then pulled it right out. I couldn't have done any of that without my bucket, now could I? Weren't you afraid? Sticky asked. He'd been terrified himself and didn't want to be the only one. Of what? Getting wet? It was perfectly dry down there. We haven't had rain for days. Something about Kate's story had caught Reynie's attention. How did you know that crack was 10.5 inches deep, he said. I don't see a tape measure in your bucket. Oh, I can always tell distances and weights and that sort of thing, said Kate with a shrug. She glanced around. For example, just by looking at it, I can tell this room is 22 feet long and 16 feet wide. Sticky, irritated that Kate hadn't been frightened in the dark drain, was inclined to be skeptical. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. Let's measure, said Reynie, fetching the ruler from the pencil woman's desk. The room was 22 feet long and 16 feet wide. Impressed, Reynie whistled, and Sticky said, not bad. Okay, back to your story, Reynie said. Did Rhonda offer to help you cheat on the test? Kate's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You sure seem to know a lot about it. Were you spying on me somehow? If you were, then I guess you know I called her a loon. We weren't spying, but that's what I figured, Reynie said. So I take it you solved the puzzle? Unless, of course, you knew all the answers. Kate snorted. Who in the world could know the answers to a test like that? Sticky did, said Reynie. It was Kate's turn to be impressed. Not bad, she said, and Sticky ducked his head shyly. Now what's this about a puzzle? Once again Reynie and Sticky looked at each other. But if you didn't know about that, said Sticky, how did you pass? I didn't pass. Nobody in my session did. To tell you the truth, I think the only reason they let me stick around was because I helped Old Yellow Suit out of a tight spot. Of course, the boys wanted to hear what had happened, and Kate was happy to oblige them. After the test was over, she said, Old Yellow Suit took us down the hall to give everybody donuts and tell the parents that she was sorry but that they had to go now, thanks for coming, that sort of thing. Some of the parents were furious. One started shouting how this was some kind of trick, and another demanded to know what these tests were all about, and Old Yellow Suit started glancing toward the exit. I could tell she was nervous, but a few people stood between her and the door, and she was trapped. I felt sorry for her, you know, because I figured she was only doing her job, whatever it is, and at least she'd given me something interesting to do today, so I decided to help her out. While the grown-ups were all yelling, and the other kids were making themselves sick on donuts, I whipped out my army knife screwdriver and took off the doorknob. Then I pointed and yelled, there's the man behind all this. That's him in the corner. And everybody turned and pushed against one another to see, except Old Yellow Suit, of course, who made a beeline for the exit. As soon as she was out, I turned off the light and closed the door, and the two of us ran off down the hall. We had a good head start, because it was dark in the room now, and they kept reaching for the doorknob and not finding it. Finally, someone turned on the light, and I suppose they all came flying out like angry hornets, but by then we were hiding in a closet. After we heard the last person leave, Old Yellow Suit smiled at me and said, I believe you should stay for the next stage of testing. And so here I am. Amazing. Reynie said. I can't believe it, cried Sticky. You're a hero. Oh good grief, Kate said, frowning with embarrassment. It was no big deal. Anybody could have done it. Now, I've told you my story, so you have to tell me yours. How did you know about Rhonda Kazembe? And what's all this about the test being a puzzle? Before they could answer her, the pencil woman poked her head into the room and said, It's time for the third test, children. Please report immediately to room 7B. Then she disappeared again. Where in the world is room 7B? Sticky said, exasperated. She never tells us where anything is. It took me half the night to find the monk building. I'm sure we can find it easily enough, Reynie said, but privately he was thinking about Sticky's words, half the night. What was Sticky doing in the city alone at night? Where were his parents? You'd better fill me in quick, Kate said. You know Old Yellow Suit isn't particularly patient. You're right, Reynie said. We'll tell you on the way. And with that, the three new friends went in search of room 7B.